Yeah, there we go. Hey guys, we're back. Sorry for the little bit of delay on the podcast. Like half of us have been pretty sick for a while. You know, we didn't feel it necessary to cough into microphones for an hour. And so that's what it is. I'm Ryface. I'm taking over the podcast today. Welcome to the Ironcast. And I have with me, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Josh Haggerty.
Josh he's been a member here for a while.
Yeah.
And he is also I guess now retired wildland firefighter, right?
Yeah, that's the plan as of right now.
Yeah.
Is to be done.
Josh and I, not very many people know. I have an older brother who has been a wildland firefighter for, I want to say close to 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Maybe 18. So he and I have shared stories, and I thought he would be a good guest on the podcast because I don't think very many people, especially on the East Coast, they don't understand the extent of how crazy wildland fires can be.
Sure. I think it's even new for a lot of people on the West Coast to be understanding it, and thankful for social media and media in general has been opened the door to knowing more about it, I think, over the last few years, but still it's hard kind of concept to grasp when you're not out there.
So what have you done for, how long have you been doing this?
I've been doing it since 2007. I was lucky enough when I got in 2007 that I worked full-time and didn't do the seasonal thing. The seasonal thing happened just recently. So I was lucky enough to get in at 2007 as just a regular crew member, you know, using a hand tool, digging line in the back of the line. I stayed on full-time, and then what I noticed about that was I would fight fire after the seasonals would be laid off. I would fight fire before the seasonals came back on, and then I got to partake in a lot of prescribed burning and things like that, and develop a lot of management skills because people were gone, and so it was left to me. So there was a lot of growth in that off season, and when the guys would come back, guys that I started with, you could tell I was a step ahead, and so that's why I've always thought it would be nice if we could figure out some way to, you know, keep crews on full time. It'd be nice. It would cost a lot of money, I think, taxpayer-wise, but there would just be a substantial growth and development in those firefighters for sure.
I think it'll be necessary more so in the future now with the nature of California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Utah being in a sustained drought, and whether or not you believe in it, climate change has been affecting a lot, and I think more so than ever, there's large swaths of the American West that it's never not fire season.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, like historically, we just need to remember, like, I know to a lot of people things seem a long time ago, but, you know, not too long ago we were frozen, and we're still coming out of that. And I think there's elements in this world right now that are probably speeding that process up a little bit. We don't necessarily know, I think, what it's supposed to look like coming out of an ice age. So, you know, it's a fine balance, but we should definitely, as humans, be doing our part to take care of this earth that we've been given. So, yeah, it's important. I think we need to start looking at wildfire in a different element. People get real upset about fire in general. You know, they get upset at the federal government. They say they caused it because back in the day we're putting fires out. You know, we said put all fires out by 10 o'clock. Put everything out, and that's what we were doing. But again, if you look historically back, it's always good to look at history. You see that fires back then were killing people by the hundreds.
Right.
And we just don't allow stuff like that to happen in this
Right.
country.
Right.
And so if you look back at that, that was frightening. And we didn't want that to continue. So that's why we did it. And we didn't want forests to burn down in the way that we thought it was a bad thing to lose these beautiful forests. And so that's
Right.
what we knew best at the time to do.
Because it disrupts our views.
Right. And people, and as you notice, we're always divided amongst our personal thoughts and views on everything. You know, one guy thinks this, one guy thinks this. So we've had these fights too, where people are like, hey, you know, we want to save this animal, but logging's killing this animal. So then you get rid of logging, and then now you have an overgrowth that was being taken care of logging because you've stopped allowing fire to burn in there, right? So you have this issue. Well, then you have this other battle now, right? You have this person that's happy the bird's coming back, but now you have these other people that are saying, well, you caused these large fires by stopping logging. And that's why it's important to listen to everybody and find that like amazing balance where you can operate on both sides of it. Because logging in general isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think selective logging is amazing.
Yeah.
Clear cutting, maybe you can only do that in certain places. That makes sense. Maybe at certain sizes, it's worth a conversation. Maybe it's not good at all.
Yeah.
Maybe you stick with selective, but what might work good for Southern California might not make sense in Canada or the Northern 48s, you know, like.
Yeah, I think people get a lot of tunnel vision, and I think, when you kind of venture into the political realm and you have people that have only one interest in mind,
right,
it's hard to see kind of globally that, and especially like with anything in nature, like of course you can't do one thing in a vacuum because it's all, that's where you can get very philosophical because it's you being out there, you kind of realize, hey, like everything is interconnected,
right,
and you can't do one thing without it affecting everything else.
Right.
So it's interesting because, I mean, all the wildland firefighters I've ever met, they all kind of sound the same in that they are almost by just inherently they are conservationists because, you know, it's not an abstract thing. The concept of nature and wildlife and the destructive power and building power of fire. If you're watching on YouTube, here's Axel's here saying hello.
Oh, being
a good boy.
You're an amazing dog. Look at you, handsome. Huh? Big ears.
What's the? Let's get into some crazy stories. What's when people ask you, because I'm sure it happens, what's the craziest thing you've ever experienced in almost 10 years of firefighting?
There's quite a few, and they vary. I mean, walking into the woods, I don't know if people understand it's dangerous. It's dangerous in itself, just being out in the woods, right?
Right.
The elements, everything, the terrain. But you add an element like wildfire to it, and then it becomes very dangerous. So I've seen a lot of amazing things, and then dangerous-wise, I mean, I was kind of opened up to it. Multiple things my first year. We were on a fire here in Nevada and over by Topaz. And, the fire was up on the hill, kind of mid-slope. And then there was a drainage below that slope. And then it came out and it kind of went into the flats there behind the school that's down there in town. And the plan was we put a dozer in there to build line, right? So the idea was, run a dozer instead of putting hand line with tools. We used a dozer and we made it 4 blades wide. And it was a large dozer, and so the line that was put in place was probably, if I remember right, pushing somewhere 30 plus feet wide.
Definitely, yeah.
Right, it's a road, and we were aware. It was talked about, the downslope winds we get here, and sure some of you guys know about it, but around the same time every day during the summer months, you know, we get a wind shift. We get those cool airs from like Tahoe and the Sierras. They come downhill and they push into the valley, and the idea is to cool off the valley and stuff. But not everywhere has winds like that. Most of the time the wind just rushing uphill all the time, goes with terrain. Kind of common sense on a lot of states. But every once in a while you go to different states where wind and stuff like that travels differently. It's important to always know, because that's the stuff that catches firefighters and kills them. Anyways, we all kind of knew, you know, about it, but when that wind shift came, I don't know if it was the comfort of the dozer line. I don't know what it was, but we were ready to burn. And I think the thing that happened, because this was my first year, so, you know, I try to look back and wonder what people were thinking. But it came down significantly fast. That was the big thing, is how fast it came down. I've seen the winds come in and push stuff downhill at a good speed, but this was running fast. There was a lot of fuel inside that drainage. Now that I look back, a lot of juniper and stuff like that, and pinyon, that torched up. And then we had an escape route. So escape route, right, is a route back to your safety zone. A safety zone is somewhere that you can stay, and regardless of the fire behavior that comes by, you're supposed to be able to survive in that safety zone. So you're always thinking of the worst possible fire behavior that could hit this safety zone, and then you determine if it's a safety zone or not. So what happened is that fire came downhill. It spotted. So what that means, it spotted over the line, started just one little ember, started over the line. We chased it, we caught it. Another one started, we got that one, and then it was just progressively got worse. And then we caught them all. We thought we caught them all, and we were back out on the line. Our overhead went down the dozer line to go take a look to see if there's any more, and they came back and said our escape route's cut off. So that meant there was fire across the line, and we couldn't get through the fire to get to our escape route anymore, so we're cut off. The secondary safety zone that was up the hill hadn't been finished yet. It was being put in by a dozer, so we only had one. We were close enough to it that we thought we were good. We got cut off and we weren't, and so we all lined out. Our boss was trying to make the decision of what to do, and then the boss took off and started running right through the green. So the green is what is unburned fuel away from the fire, right? So on the other side of the line. Started running through the green towards, I thought was our safety zone, you know? And so the crew just followed along. We were running in line. And at that time, my position was called the monkey paw. So I was in the back of the line with like a hoe type tool and a rake. And so you kind of come along the line and you clean up the hand line with a rake. And I hated that thing, but that was my job. But anyways, there was a person in front of me who was running at a slower pace. She couldn't keep up with the group in front. And so as we're jumping like sage and running, the fire's over here coming at us, and I can feel the heat on my ear, and it's starting to burn my ear. You know, I put my hand up every once in a while, and it's hot, and we're running. And the issue is the crew's taking off, and there's a substantial gap being put in between them and her, and I'm behind her. And then eventually the crew kind of turns juniper, and they're running, and then I'm running and I'm trying to look at the ground so I don't trip, and I look up and I can't see the crew. They're gone.
From the smoke?
A little bit of the smoke, but no, more from the speed. They're gone.
Oh, wow.
The person in front of me was running so slow that it allowed that gap, and the crew was gone. Our overhead was spread out at that point, so they were in other places, and so I was the last in the line. And I remember thinking, this is my first year in fire, and the fire's like burning my ear. Like, I'm like, man, I might get like burned over, you know?
Rookie mistake, literally.
Yeah, and I'm like, this is unreal. And so I'm like, something in my head said, pass her. And so I stepped out from the side, and I went to run past her. And as soon as I stepped, that first initial step to take off, to go past her, there was this overwhelming feeling that I was doing the wrong thing. And I remember like turning, because she was on my right, I remember turning and looking at her, and she was exhausted, sweating, scared, tired. And I remember thinking like, I can't I can't just keep going. And so she had, the pack on, and there's a little chest strap like most backpacks have. I remember I like grabbed it and I twisted it in my hand and my wrist, and I started running her at my pace. And she was telling me to, let her go, stop. She would fall, and I'd drag her for a minute, pick her back up, and she would run and kept telling me to let go. And I just was yelling. I don't remember everything I yelled at her, but just, we got to keep going, got to keep going. And I just held on to her and ran. And eventually it was like, and I'm sure I was looking at her and the ground because I didn't want to fall, but it was like instantly we ran out of the big, thick PJ and ran right into the safety zone, the big parking lot, and our buggies were parked there. The rest of the crew was standing there, and we just came out, and it was just like, holy shit, like, we made it. Like, I'm good.
Damn.
And so that was pretty intense, I think. I don't know how it would feel now if I was to go through the motions. Maybe I would go through it and think, oh, this isn't too bad. I know where the stuff is, and I'll get here. But when you're new, there's so much stuff going on, it's hard to bring it all in. And so nowadays I look at things and I can see that it's a lot comfortable, and I have to explain to people like, hey, no, we're in a good spot. So maybe I would think differently, but during that time that was pretty gnarly. And so that was like what I thought I did. I was like, man, this is what we do. This is crazy.
This is real life.
Yeah, and I went to Angora Fire shortly after that.
For the uninitiated, what was the Angora Fire?
Oh, okay. So the Angora Fire was up in South Lake Tahoe. Pretty significant because of the amount of homes that it burned. It was
100 plus, right?
Yeah, I think I want to say it was like 200 and something.
Yeah,
that it burned. I can't remember. And that's a problem too. A lot of these fires start to blend together.
Right.
I go to a lot of them in the fire season. But yeah, so that one was pretty significant. I worked up in Tahoe. We were on a fire here in Reno. Anyways, we saw the plume from Reno, downtown Reno, from South Lake. Obviously, everybody was dispatched to go to it. It was an immediate thing. We took off. We went up there. Angora Fire started from a campfire that was left over the night before from a little party, There was some overgrowth up there in Angora in the South Lake where it took off, but it was a pretty gnarly situation, how quickly it took off and the amount of homes it took and how it took them. But yeah, we drove in there, and there was a bunch of fire stuff all staged on the road, big structure engines and stuff like that. And we drove past that and then kept driving, and then fire was hopping the road. We drove through that and then drove right into to where all the houses were burning. And it was like, that's not typically where hand crews or hot shots spend their time a lot of time. Like, yeah, we fight fire in the urban interface for sure, but we're used mainly out in that more remote area, cutting line, doing burn-up operations, stuff like that. But the more and more that folks move into the woods, the more and more urban interfaces just become part of the game every year. And so with that, we tried to start saving homes. At one point, we were in there, and it had already fired, came through on the ground and kind of different trees. And then we kind of got a second wave, and that was gnarly too. I'm thinking, this is crazy, but they came over the canopy above us, and I'm thinking, like, this is unreal. And you have those big, South Tahoe homes burning, right? So you see the whole house engulfed, and then the little propane tanks that are on the deck are blowing up because they don't vent that well. And then the big propane tanks are venting, and so that sounds like you're standing next to a jet. And this is all going on around you, and you got this one house, so you're trying to, like, cut down the fence, cut down all the debris around it, dig line, throwing flammables away from the house. And so that in itself was intense, just trying to save houses, and we did that for a while. And and then we eventually went back into the woods and started digging line to catch the rest of the fire, and that was a 36-hour shift, I think.
Explain to people who don't know, you're on a hand crew, right?
Yeah, I was at that time I was on a Type 2 IA hand crew.
Yeah, go ahead and explain that to people, because it can be confusing. And I remember sitting one time dealing with. I don't even remember the context, but people just said like, I just don't understand why they just don't put it out.
Oh, okay. Well,
And this was, it might have been, I want to say around the time, whether or not it was the Angora fire or something else where it burned homes. And you just, these two people were just talking, they're just like, I just don't understand how they can let that happen.
Yeah,
so how do you fight a wildland fire?
Well, you want me to explain the difference between the crews and then go into that, or go into the
yeah, we can talk about the whole thing, I think.
Okay. So like, just like in a lot of things, there's different categories of engines, different types of engines, there's different types of hand crews and stuff, and what it comes down to is training and the equipment that they have and certifications they've passed, things like that. So like starting off with like a type 2 crew, right? The thing with them is they're going to come with less logistical things. Like they'll have less radios. They'll most likely arrive in a bus. They'll have less years of firefighting experience typically. Overhead will tend to be less. There might just be a crew boss and stuff like that. So it's experience, time, equipment, and how they arrive is a big part. And then when you bump up to, and what it typically is 20 people on a crew, hand crew. You can go a little more. You don't want to go under 18. That makes it so you can't travel like nationally and stuff. So it's 20 people, and what you have is typically on a hand crew, you'll have a crew soup who's in charge of the whole thing. There'll be like, say, 2 captains who work underneath that soup, right? And they'll be in charge of 2 like mods or buggies, right? So like A buggy and B buggy, which is the crew split in half. Then under them, you'll have a squaddy for each, squad boss. So their job is to have like smaller squads of people off of that buggy or whatever. And then you'll have lead firefighters or senior firefighters, just people that have certain certifications and then time. And then you have sawyers, swampers. So sawyers are using chainsaws, and swampers are picking up the stuff the sawyers are cutting. Then you have toolers that have, hose and Pulaskis, axe-like things to dig the line behind. So that's typically what a crew is. They carry everything they need to get the job done. They work, they don't need a lot of stuff to operate typically. And so you have that, type 2. Type 2 IA, national.
IA means initial attack, which means they will go directly. It's like war. You talk about it like almost in terms of war.
Well, it's modeled off of
you
military.
Just go and you are going to directly attack it.
Right. So type 2 is typically going to be ordered for like the cleanup, right? Mop up, so cleaning up after the fire, putting out little hot spots and stuff like that. The resources you want to order right away are hot shot crews, smoke jumpers, hell attack, engines, type 2 IA crews, right? Typically, you're going to see some of the, depending on where it is, different resources ordered right away. But yeah, you have type 2 IA, so it means they're that initial attack, so they have certain quals. They have more quals than the type 2 crew. They have more equipment. They come in four-wheel drive vehicles, whether it's a pickup truck or a buggy, which is like a little four-wheel drive bus. And they have overhead and firefighters with more experience. So there's a list of things you have to go by to be certified every year. You have to hit a minimal requirement or return rate of firefighters and qualifications and equipment. And then above them is you have hot shots, or what's considered type 1. Hot shots, again, that's what's considered like elite in the hand crew world. And so, again, it's just they have more certification, more return rate, more equipment, things like that. And they have to do a cert process nowadays to become hotshot crews. And then once they become hotshot crews, every year they kind of have another recert of that to make sure everything's on point and they're ready to go for the next season. It kind of changes every year depending, but I believe right now we're at 104 hotshot crews in the entire nation.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. And again, that's anywhere from 22 people to 18 people.
Yeah. And their primary purpose is to go in to drive in as close to the fire as they can, and oftentimes they will have to hike. And their primary means of attack is to how you stop a wildfire is you deny it fuel. That's all you can do, really.
Right.
I mean, you can't, when you have thousands of acres on fire, you can't just take buckets of water and dump it constantly.
Yeah, you usually don't even have water sources.
Most of the time, wildfire will go only on the ground, even in forests. It'll just creep along the ground. And all you have to do is, that's what they do, is they literally dig a line that strips the earth of all the fuel, and that fire will burn up to that line and not past it, hopefully.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah, that's the idea, and that's how you stop it. You starve it.
Yeah, it looks just like a walking trail. You decide how wide you want it off of the fuels that you're in, you know. Sometimes out here, like in the desert, it can be 10 inches wide. You get into timber, it might have to be 1 foot to 2 feet wide. Just depends. And then you're removing, with the chainsaws, a saw swath of brush, you know, timber, brush, stuff like that. Toolers come in and put that line in. It works really well. And then the other thing that we do is burn operation. So when that's called going direct with hand line. So if you got to do, say, a backfire, because going direct doesn't make sense, maybe the ground is not feasible for the time frame you'd be able to put in line. So a lot of times you can grab a road or a dozer line, and you'll light that fire with an anchor point. So that means somewhere the fire is not going to leave from. You've anchored the fire in. So once you start fire burning from there, it's going to stay at that point and just move towards the fire that's coming down the hill. And then you're going to take fire down to a tie-in point, essentially kind of like another anchor point, I guess you could think of it as. But it has to be controlled. So once you get into your end point, that'll stop it, and then you'll just have fire burning back towards the main fire. So that's kind of the two big things that we do in the sense of like firefighting, direct attack and stuff.
And the point of doing a burn operation is you're burning up that fuel, so the main fire can't overrun it, right?
Right. It's just going to hit, the two fires are going to meet, right? And then on the fire you lit, there's nothing behind it for the main fire to burn, so you eliminated all fuel.
Right. So you want to do those burn operations because it's on a smaller scale. And go ahead and talk about fire creates its own conditions. Wildland fires can.
Its own weather and stuff.
Yeah. And so part of doing a burn operation, for a lot of people that don't know, it seems like very kind of counterproductive. Like the instinct is you want to keep this thing as small as possible, which is not necessarily a good practice, because that can, in the long run, like we said before, lead to more devastating wildfires in the long run, because nature doesn't exist on our timeline,
right? And
the timeline of our lives.
And that's a hard thing to kind of put out there, because the thing is we don't always do it on a small scale. Sometimes it is done on a larger scale for the idea of we have the opportunity to remove fuel also, and just because with how the fire is and the size of it, it might have to be an incredibly large multi-day operation, multi-month burn operation. Like it can go a long distance.
You get out there in the middle of like Nevada, which is very, very remote. Nevada has some of the most remote places you can get in the United States.
It's the most mountainous state in the United States.
Yeah. And so there's oftentimes where wildfires will burn for weeks before anybody even notices them.
And more, just with people being out and about, and living out there, stuff's getting called in earlier and earlier. And
that's true.
Especially with logging, they have cameras set up nowadays on multi-mountains, and one person's watching all these videos, and so they're spotting stuff. And then Forest Service has their own lookouts and things. But
if you've ever followed me on social media, if you follow me in the summertime, sometimes I will tweet out links to the UNR Seismology Lab. They have a camera network set up for a lot of western Nevada and the Sierra Nevada mountains, which is Nevada and California. and they have a network of high definition cameras, and those are used primarily for fire detection. And you can watch how things unfold in real time. It's pretty wild. So if you've ever followed me on social media, you wonder why I'm doing that. That's part of the reason why. And it's really cool.
Oh yeah, everything to do with Mother Nature is pretty cool. Whether it's hurricane, tornadoes, just snowstorms.
I love it, man.
It's phenomenal.
I'd chase
that.
Oh
yeah, it's phenomenal. The same thing with wildfire. It's an incredibly powerful thing. But yeah, with firing, like I said, it could be large or small, and it may be the right decision, might be the wrong decision. So that's where you have to decide what makes most sense. Obviously, firefighter and public safety comes first, and making sure that you can complete that with that in mind.
Like life and property.
Yeah, and we want to keep firefighters and the public safe. So we try to make a tactical decision off of that, and then on top of that decision, it's what's going to work the quickest so that we can catch it too. Because one of the things that's hard to balance, and there's so many, like we've talked about before, is there's not one simple answer to all this, and every place is different, and you just have to allow that and understand that some places it makes sense to let fires burn, and some places it doesn't, and some places it makes sense to catch it early. And one of the biggest reasons for catching fire small and early is when you allow it to say burn, and say there is stuff close, like 10 miles, 20, 100 miles away, there's towns and stuff like that. You don't know necessarily how you got an idea, but you don't know necessarily how weather and the topography and the fuels are going to react every day as you let that go and grow and grow.
It's a living thing.
Right.
Literally living, breathing thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you think about it, if you don't get some of these fires aggressively off the start, now you're allowing for more lives to come into play, right? So you have to bring in more firefighters, say you let it get too big, and now it's getting too close to these towns, people want it out. Well, now I'm bringing in more firefighters, so now there's more exposure to more people. Now I've letting it grow bigger, so now it's closer to that town, which it was far away from. So there's a balance. It's
costing more money, and you can't spend money without it being a political thing.
Right.
So, but that's another.
Well, yeah, and so with that whole money thing, the more the fires get bigger and bigger, and they cost more and more, and then that money has to come from somewhere. And the bummer part a lot of times is with the feds, they have money set aside for fire and money set aside for fields work. Fields work is like going in and off season and going in there and mimicking kind of like fire, right, and cutting down certain percentage of brush and timber, so that you can bring it back to as close as you can to like a historical state of what that forest is supposed to look like, I guess. Some are so far gone you can't, and you got to kind of allow it to be what it is now. But the problem with fires getting so big and doing what they do, and just the element of things cost more every year we go on, the price of everything goes up, that money comes from the fuels, and then we don't necessarily have the funds to do that project work that would help lower the size of wildfires. So, it's a balance where like some of us are like, man, we should just put this one out, this one out, this one out, and you'd save a lot of money. But maybe there's another reason why it goes big, because again, there is a lot of politics, and a lot of it comes from just regular people like you and I that watch the news and be like, I don't know, this is messed up, and they put a lot of pressure on people in charge to get stuff done.
And it's one of those things like I don't think unless you've come face to face with something like that in real life. I lived in New York for 2 years, and the concept of wildfires is just a completely removed, abstract thing. Right. And it's easy to say like, well, why don't they just put it out? And it's like, well, have you ever tried to piss out a campfire? You know, it just doesn't work like that.
You don't have enough buddies to piss it out.
Yeah, yeah, and and somebody made the campfire way too big.
Yeah.
But you know, that it does get expensive because it's not just man hours.
Yeah.
We can cycle this back to how you fight it. You have, you know, the ground crews, the hotshot crews that go in, they start digging a line. Then you have the smoke jumpers. That's when lightning comes through and starts, or somebody in a remote place leaves a campfire and it starts a very small fire. The easiest thing to do is to fly in a crew of people, have them parachute out of a plane, and then hike in, put it out. Mm-hmm. So those guys are really those are like, you know, those are Navy SEAL type.
Yeah, it's just
and then hell attack is the same thing, but on a helicopter. That's what my brother did for many years.
It's just different tools for the job.
Right.
They work better in certain areas. Some do better here, some do better there. It's just there's an array of tools in there, and smoke jumpers kind of have their thing, and hell attack and shot crews and engines.
And then you have the engines that cost a lot of money, and then you have the biggest chunk of money will be, besides the labor, would be the helicopters.
Aviation.
The aviation. So have you ever had be saved by a plane?
Well, saved by one, I would say no, because like there's some crazy stuff that people have had to use aviation for to like get rescued from, and that's not never happened to me. But like I've obviously used aviation to get some of my firefighters out because maybe they're allergic to bees and got stung, and we're in the middle of nowhere. You know, there's no roads for hundreds of miles, and so you fly in a helicopter. You have to build a landing spot for them, or you've already built one that's kind of pre-planned for those bad things to happen, and so hopefully you've already built one. You should have, and then call in a helicopter, land them, load your guy out, and send him to a hospital, or if they're hit by a tree, you know. But most of mine have been like a fall injury or a like bee sting, allergic reaction, poison oak, something like that. So we've used them for that sense, but then I've used
fighting the fire.
I've used them for fighting fire, where like I'll see if I can paint this picture, but like say fire behavior right on the direct line, right on the edge. So I've found a good spot to anchor in my line and start to corral this fire. Fire can be so significantly large right on that edge. You know, you could have 40-foot flame lengths. You know, it's possible to get close to it, and it's burning right there. So what you can use is like helicopters that have buckets hanging underneath them that fill up water. You have all different sizes of buckets, all different sizes of helicopters, right? They can carry different loads of water. Same with aircraft. You have smaller aircraft, larger, that can carry larger amounts of retardant, which is a chemical mixed with water that can stay on the ground a little longer, moist-wise. And so we've used those where they come in, they dump that bucket of water, or that tanker drops that retardant on the edge or close to the edge of the fire, and essentially takes it from say 40 feet tall to maybe like a foot tall, right? Because now we got everything wet, and so it's just kind of burning there. Then we could come in real quick, say you got 40 feet of that cooled down, boom, punch in that line real quick, get the next copper just doing a helicopter doing circles, right? He goes, fills up, comes back, he hits the next 40, we dig line, he hits the next 40, you dig line, and you do that for miles until you get around the whole thing. Same thing for like engines as well. You know, they can use the helicopters and then come in with water and also put in line if needed. If it's grass, a lot of times it's just water that's needed. So I've used aviation for obviously just tactical firefighting use, and then getting guys out that have been hurt and stuff. And then obviously we use helicopters when there are no roads. Our crews will fly in on helicopters and get dropped off somewhere in the backwoods, and then start fighting fire.
It's fun stuff.
Yeah, and then too, the crews can be flown by airplane up to like Alaska or Florida, even out to the East Coast. A lot of times this year, a lot of crews drove out there. But
my brother just got deployed to Region 8, which is Georgia, North Carolina.
Yeah, that's where my old crew is. They're in Alabama right now.
Yeah,
with leaf blowers.
Yeah, it's weird. Like kind of paying attention to it, because logged on to Facebook for the first time in forever and saw my brother got deployed to Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah.
He was just going up into the Great Smoky Mountains, and
Yeah.
but they don't have the same resources as they do because of the forests. It's so wet on the East Coast.
Yeah, it's a different firefighting back there, and it's cool too. I mean, those guys getting work done, especially in Florida and those southern states. I mean, man, their like prescribed burn program is just unreal, and it's a good program, and they do great down there.
Yeah,
and they have minimal resources, but they sure do get a lot of work done.
Where's the most interesting place you've had to fight a fire?
Most interesting place.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I
mean, like, where have you? Like, you can answer that. Like, where's the most remote place you've had to go? Like, my brother got that one year when Australia had those huge firestorms. He got sent out there.
Oh wow, yeah. I remember we were on call to go to Jerusalem, and then that got canceled.
No shit.
I don't know what that was like. I don't know, maybe 2011, somewhere around there. But yeah, there was a big fire in Jerusalem. It was like, oh my God. And so then the phone calls start going off, like, how many people can you provide? What kind of, and what can you send? And so we were going to send, because we kept on a lot of people that year, and I believe we were going to send out like a half a crew or something. But that was going to be probably the craziest one. The rest of my time has been spent here. Fought fire from the border of Mexico to the border of Canada. To answer that question, I think it's dynamic to the place. Like, fighting fire in Southern California is unique in its own crazy way.
Yeah.
And so that's weird. Yeah. But for me, the place I like to fight fire the most, and I think is just really interesting, is Idaho. I've always loved Idaho. You get up high enough, and it's remote, and it's big country. It's big mountains, big animals, big everything, big fire. And it's just a unique place. But I fight fire in a lot of remote places. That's just kind of what my job entails. So whether it's Nevada, California, I've been to places where I've wondered if even an Indian ever stood here because it's so out there, and it's like, why would anybody be even here, There's not a lot of reason to be, but it's just being in that rugged terrain where it's just like, wow, like, people don't come here. There's no trails. There's no road. And that's becoming harder and harder, too, with the infringement of people on land and stuff like that. That's why I think it is neat that we have public lands, but we've secured up a large amount of this stuff so it doesn't get overdeveloped, because we'll keep pushing in if we can.
Yeah. I mean, that's true.
But yeah, I'd say Idaho, up towards Coeur d'Alene. I was 10 miles off the Canadian border a while back. That was nice.
Was that on one of the ones that was like,
all
technically,
year?
Well, international, or burned on both sides of the border?
No, not that one. I wasn't. But I know what you're talking about. The one that went over that'd be like to the northwest.
Yeah, okay.
But like,
was that 2014?
Yeah, I can't remember.
That was a wild year.
Yeah, I can't remember. I don't think Horseshoe went into Mexico. I don't think it did. But that was right close. I mean, you could see the fence when you're driving to camp and stuff. So, and then that one was crazy. See, they all have their thing. But that one was crazy because
flavor.
Yeah, we would do burn operations, and we'd have to get a loudspeaker and someone who spoke Hispanic, and they get on the loudspeaker on the buggy and would say, "Hey, we're gonna burn. You need to get out of there," because there was immigrants coming through. That's an area where they come through to come from Mexico to America, and man, that and I was in charge, and that was like when I first opened my Burn Boss, because you can open task books so you can get different qualifications, and so I was in charge there, and man, that was a whole nother dynamic where you're like, man, I don't know if I want to like this, like, I don't know if there's people in there, and so like you do your best to make sure they're not, and we would hit the loudspeaker, we'd have helicopters fly over and look and do work, and nothing bad ever happened. But there was a couple times where we were prepping and we'd find all their stuff, or one night one of the crews saw some running out, so it's dynamic.
Shit. That's wild.
Yeah, you know, it's just like the... Yeah, so there's a lot of different... Like, the more I think about it right now, I can think of all sorts of crazy remote things that I've done. I mean, I stood on Johnny Ringo's grave.
No kidding.
Yeah. So that was neat. That was over kind of by Tombstone, by a horseshoe fire. Yeah, the family the grave was next to was still the same family that lived there then, and so the story was just passed on. And so the lady who lived there, the great-great-grandmother, whatever, walked out there and found him shot in the head. She didn't know if he did it or if someone else had did it. A lot of times back in those days, outlaws would commit suicide and stuff, so they didn't know. But when Tombstone lost law, or I mean not lost law, but became a law town, the outlaws built a town up in these mountains where I was fighting fire, and they would travel back and forth. So you hear little cool history things when you go around the states. And I would have never visited Johnny Ringo's grave where it was. That's in the middle of nowhere. Nowhere.
Watch the movie.
Yeah, it's an amazing movie. Pretty close, I guess, how he died.
Really?
Because in the movie, he landed against a tree. So it's kind of funny. She found him against a tree. Yeah, and he's buried right there.
Holy shit.
So.
Anything else?
I don't know. I could probably talk forever on fire, but...
Yeah, me too. Regale people with stories.
I think one thing is important is just to remember that, you know, most people that are in fire, I would say 99% of them are in it because it puts them out in the woods. And so even on their free time and when they're off firefighting, they're in the woods. These people generally care about the forest, and that's where they want to spend the majority of their time. And so every person I've met in there is always trying to do the right thing. It's just like anything. And if we look back historically, anytime we try to fight Mother Nature, it's a hard battle, and we lose a lot of times. It's not easy. There's politics involved, but the people, firefighting-wise, are amazing people. They're hard workers. They are giving you 150% of their time. There's a lot of them that don't come home every season. And I just, before you get upset and negative on things, I would just say try to maybe understand the situation or be willing to consider that it's just a dynamic job and all, and people are trying their best to do the right things. And I definitely felt over the last few years way more support from the communities than the years before, and I'm honestly thankful because of social media and media in general. I think it's helped out. So those people are trying really hard, and they're all really good people that are out there. Amen. Yeah.
And if anybody is interested in potentially pursuing a career, how would they go about that? And be in shape. Join a CrossFit gym.
Yeah, obviously you want to be in shape going out there. We work in remote countries, carry weights up to 100 pounds, and you have to be fit. You have to be able to have that endurance to go. But, you know, there's a lot of websites you can go to get started, but you can go to NWCG website, and that's they do a lot of the basic certification. They do all the certification, but you can get your basic certifications there so that you can get red carded and go into fire. The other thing is you can go to your community college. Like here, TMCC has one where you can take the basic wildland firefighting classes to get started, and those basic classes will allow you to get a job. And USA Jobs is how you apply to federal jobs in all the United States. And then there's local departments, like city departments, that have wildland stuff, so you can go there, just call them. But I think the best way to do it is, do that, but try to find someone who's in wildland fire and have them help guide you through the process. There's a lot of stuff to be done, but frankly, it's I don't consider it that hard of a job to get. Now, getting into different ranks inside fires can be difficult. Hot shot crews, hell attack, engines, smoke jumping, all that stuff, you know, there's certain requirements to apply, but to get into wildland firefighting in general is pretty easy after you get your certifications, and
you can pass the physical.
Yeah, you pass a pack test that we have, and then each crew kind of has its own little thing as well. But it's an easy job. You can do it in the summer between school or between anything, but if you want to see places in the country that you'll never go to because it's hard to get to, you'll see that. You'll see amazing things. you'll work with amazing people, and you'll definitely develop a new outlook on life and work ethic and all sorts of leadership skills that I'm glad that I've developed over the years, just working with people that are just phenomenal people doing phenomenal things in the middle of the woods that no one knows about.
Yeah, it's wild. Cool. Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah. See you guys later.